Hello, hello. Good to be with you. Thank you for joining in a small little circle. So I'll break with the rules already, and if you have questions during my talk, let's make it more fun. And you already promised me a question, so feel free to shout and disagree with me. I was a little bit lazy in the sense that I didn't prepare slides for this talk, but used slides that we presented to CEOs of vendors in quantum computing. Last week, we do quarterly briefings for them. But a lot of them address, of course, the topic of scaling and security. During lunch, I was in a meeting with the German government officials talking about the threat of quantum computing breaking our known encryption. And it's always interesting for me. I am German. I'm born in Frankfurt, but I've lived in the US for 25 years. And much of the US government, but also the UK, Israel, Australia, is our clients. We help them with decision intelligence on global quantum supply chains, ecosystems, and topics like this. And in this lunch meeting, there was talk like, we think that maybe in 2040, there will be a quantum computer that might break our encryption. So yeah, we're pretty confident. And the tone in general was, like in the US, and this is very stereotypical, but it's true, but in the US, this is a war, we need to do faster and more and spend more billions. And the meeting is like, so I said, 2040, I think we still have time, and we'll do some PQC, and we're working on a roadmap in the next 2 years. So it's a very different tone and a very different culture. In the US and US allies, this is a war, and this is a weapon. And it sounds very dramatic, but for me, that's one of the key takeaways here. You'll see some other contents in these slides. If there's anything that interests you, let me know. I think I'll start here. Let's see if there is a pointer. There is no pointer, at least I can't figure it out. Talking about progress of quantum computing, right? So what we do is that we kind of define our own stack of quantum computing. Started with the bottom of the stack, the qubit plane hardware, middle of the stack, quantum error correction control readout, top of the stack with algorithms, applications, and users. And we have hundreds of slides that take this stack or flavor of that stack to compare, analyze, assess how vendors, qubit modalities, computing architectures compare. And this is just kind of a large overview slide that, of course, looks at some of the major platforms, startups, but also the software and algorithms that support that, and just that general sense of progress. And this slide is starting to get crowded. We've been presenting this slide for 8 years. 3 years ago, you maybe had barely a dozen boxes on here. So just the pace of development, but also the quality of that development has vastly improved over the last few years. This is a slide that many of you will be familiar with. This is from the DARPA QBI resource assessment on what it takes to build a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. The only thing that we did here is that we overlay the British quantum operations per second kind of nomenclature, kiloquops, gigaquops, teraquops, petaquops, and so forth, to make this a little bit more tangible. And what we think is that at the tera to petaquop kind of frontier is where you have a cryptographically relevant quantum computer. This is important because most of the known programs, and we'll have a slide that review them in a minute, don't look that far ahead. And most vendor roadmaps don't look that far ahead as well. Vendor roadmaps are very focused on kiloquop, NISQ error applications, right? They start to look at megaquop and maybe gigaquop, which is where this FTQC, fault-tolerant quantum computing nomenclature starts to kick in. But they don't look at what happens beyond it, not from a qubit scaling point of view, but more importantly, from a resource point of view, energy, and also a financial point of view. And those things, just like the qubit performance, just exponentially increase as you go from scaling error to scaling error here. And that's something that's not well understood in the ecosystem. I will skip this slide. I'll skip this slide. And we'll look at the qubit modalities. You're, I assume, familiar with most of the big quantum modalities, right? Different ways to build qubits. This is also a slide that we've been doing for 8 years. In my team, I have 3 people that spend their days updating the data in this. So this comes directly from a big database. We reach out to vendors, the archives, papers, and so forth every day and update this. even 2 years ago, this slide would have been mostly white or gray. White meaning we don't know, gray means this is a vendor making probably a marketing claim, but nothing substantial. So just the progress in each of these architectures, but also across architectures, is stunning. And the simple fact that we have some green emerging, and you have the legend down here, meaning this is sort of proven and deployable, is actually tremendous. So we're making a lot of progress, but we're making progress on architectures at this kilo-QoP, mega-QoP, maybe giga-QoP era, not anything that scales towards larger systems. And there are many challenges here that I'm happy to discuss at some point. Always this question of, is quantum computing only an engineering challenge, or are there still science challenges? And these are mostly engineering challenges, but I'll get back to that on a different slide as well. Error correction, we'll skip that. If you look at some of these roadmaps here, IBM, of course, that has been doing a fantastic job at just laying out roadmaps for all the different QPUs. And now they do have a QPU roadmap, BlueJ, that goes into the giga-QoP and beyond era. And if you just verify these assessments and the feasibility, you see, again, a lot of green here, a shocking amount of green. And these hero light blue demonstrations where in a lab they were able to show performance that starts to indicate their ability to scale, right? So this is how we kind of assess this. This is IonQ. I'll skip that, and I'll skip this. These were just recommendations for these quantum computing hardware vendors and their CEOs. I'll summarize them on the last slide if you're curious of how to position themselves. And in these eras, what we're really starting to see is that vendors are understanding the concept, and there is an increasing focus on folks saying, hey, we're going to build for this specific era, or we're just going to shut up, sit down, and engineer for the future. And it's very different kind of ecosystem and roadmap applications here that deliver on that. And in this NISC era or kilo-QoP, all your usual suspects that you're familiar with, I think we do see a surge, a fitting name, from IonQ, not just in their marketing budgets, but also their technical and product performance. They are not just all marketing anymore. And that's interesting. And if you go through these eras, you see different kind of vendors coming in here. Somebody like PsiQuantum, Jeremy O'Brien, the CEO, who says, I'm either building a fault-tolerant quantum computer or nothing. We have 0 qubits. Well, what does that mean, FTQC? This could mean mega-QoPs, right? And this is far, far away from running Shor or factoring any of our encryption. So be mindful and careful of these terms and definitions, what it actually means to be FTQC. It's a fairly meaningless statement. It just means, in this case, that you probably can run a use case that will deliver some sort of quantum advantage, whatever you might define that. But by no means would a PsiQuantum computer or any of the known roadmaps, there we go, get to that point. And if you look at what PsiQuantum, and we've done their due diligence for the latest fundraise, claims for teraQuoP era, this is a lot of red, and red is not good, right? This is scientific challenges, not just engineering challenges, and that's where you see the switch. So the dynamics of these architectures really change, whether you're building for a near-term era, kilo-QoP, mega-QoP, giga-QoP, or larger scale, longer-term era, where you just have different requirements.
May I ask something?
Yes.
These PsiQuantum things that they're building in Brisbane and Chicago, where will they be placing these things?
That's the generation 1. But they, of course, make the argument, I don't remember what they call it. They don't call it a rack. They give it a different name because they have a great marketing department, and they don't call it shelf and module. They have another name for it again, that they can just pull it out and plug it back in, which I would challenge because they have different connectivity, they have different cryogenic requirements, also at the interconnect level. So it sounds good on paper, but this whole upgrade story that they are selling is something I'd look into. So that's a little bit about just how we think about the technical regimes of how these vendors go about it. And again, just to stretch that nobody really is building a quantum computer that is cryptographically relevant or Shor capable, because there's no money in it today. People are busy with these eras today, but those requirements are very, very poorly understood. However, what we are seeing, and AIDAQ is going to come up a few times here, is larger architecture thinking. Not just in terms of building quantum computing hardware that crosses these different eras from a gigaquark to maybe a teraquark era, but also crossing quantum applications. So not just quantum computing, but in the case of AIDAQ, QKD, both fiber and satellite-based, PQC, and I wouldn't be shocked if there's an announcement on quantum sensors as well. So this recognition that you need to build a larger system to enable that kind of scale. And a story I've been telling a few times over the last 2 days, the earning call of AIDAQ just 2 weeks ago, the CEO, Niccolo De Masi, his opening statement was that if you are interested in the freedom of the Western world, there's only one company that can keep you safe, and that's AIDAQ. Because we offer the communication, satellite and terrestrial, to keep you safe, and the quantum computing capabilities to attack your opponents. And then he went into this tirade of AIDAQ being bigger than Tesla and NVIDIA combined. But that's the storyline, right? Again, to my introduction, this is a war in the US, but it's also, people are thinking about being a billionaire is boring now, right? Everybody can be a billionaire. That's where that comes from. Some analysis on the addressable market, happy to answer questions. So go to ecosystems. What all of this means to me is that nobody can build this alone. Not Niccolo De Masi at AIDAQ, probably not even the US, but I'll come back to that. But no individual market. Germany can't build this alone. And I'm not saying that out of anger because I got kicked out of here. But if you look at the system requirements, at the resource requirements behind it for energy, for talent, if you look at the supply chain, and we analyze over 740 suppliers of components and raw materials that go into quantum hardware. If you look at the political requirements, no individual country can do this. Only alliances can do this of countries. And of course, you see some emerging, DARPA QBI. And again, I think it's interesting there's a conception in the public that DARPA QBI, the purpose of this program, for those of you that don't know, DARPA is the innovation arm of the American Department of Defense. QBI, the Quantum Benchmarking Initiative, is a program that's been running for a year now, $300 million. And there's a misconception that the point of it is to identify the most promising vendors and help them build some sort, and it's poorly defined, of a fault-tolerant quantum computer. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to consolidate the sector, gain access to all of the IP, and build a large, large system. In the US, there's talk of a quantum curtain, and there's going to be people who will be behind the quantum curtain and people who will be outside the quantum curtain. If you're behind the quantum curtain, some future version of DARPA QBI, you're going to have all the resources, all the support imaginable, including from allies. Donald Trump just landed in London, and he's with the King right now, and he's going to announce a big quantum initiative between the US and the UK tomorrow. We will make you a winner in the American sense, right? You'll have everything you need. And maybe the UK will be in it, maybe Canada will be in it, maybe Australia will be in it, maybe not, right? China, we all have speculation of what's happening, and then we see the other ecosystems. And here my argument is that that's not going to be enough. I'll skip over this to get to this slide, my favorite bubble graph. If you analyze these alliances and these markets, the European Union could develop the resources, the talent, and the ambition to build a system that I'm describing at a teraquark era. And by the way, if you look at the energy requirements, you need a dedicated nuclear plant. If you look at the network infrastructure, if you look at the talent pool, these are extremely large-scale efforts. The European Union could deliver on it. My dad was an assistant commissioner at the European Commission. I spent 9 years in Brussels as a child. I don't know how much the European Union has changed since. I'm not the youngest anymore, but I struggle believing that the EU will get this done on a timeline where you're competing with very aggressive US awakening in quantum that will put a lot of dollars against this, China that is unrelenting, and other markets like the UK, like Australia, like Japan, like South Korea, being very, very, very aggressive in this. So what's left, right? From an American perspective, you do want a couple of partners. You can go with AUKUS, Australia, the UK, and the US. You can go with NATO, but do you need it from a US perspective? Probably not, and it's very messy, right? Why do that? Maybe under a previous administration, that would have been appealing, not under the current or future ones. So what are the alternatives, right? Where can a country like the UK move? Where can a country like Germany move? And what alliances can you forge here? I don't have a good answer to that, but when we run those scenarios, it's looking pretty bleak, which is why my outlook is one of a duopoly in quantum. We're very confident in that, unfortunately. We'll skip that. So this is one more point I wanted to make when I said at the very beginning, looking at our tech stack, that these are all engineering challenges. Well, that depends on the state of this error that you're at, right? You have the same errors at the bottom, kilo, mega, giga, tera, petaquark. Somebody asked about PsiQuantum. PsiQuantum was busy with science problems for the last few years, right? You gotta catch a photon with another photon, measure and control it with another photon, and do that millions of times. A big scientific challenge. Now they are at an engineering challenge. At some point, they will reach a scientific challenge again. Because of the dispersion that they have in the photons at a very large scale, it kind of switches. We call this concept pathway. And different qubit modalities and different QBU vendors will have different challenges that are either engineering or scientific driven at different stages in these errors. So you cannot say that, oh, if PsiQuantum solves this scientific challenge, all the rest will be an engineering challenge, and they will crack shore. Same as for IonQ, you can't say if IonQ just fixes all of the engineering in the next few years, they'll, Niccolo Di Masi will become a trillionaire. This goes up and down. And here's an example. We did a project for NATO at the beginning of this year to assess vendors against the requirements of cryptographically relevant quantum computers. So these are 7, there's 1 missing. Individual quantum computing vendors that you all know well, and we've assessed them on their even confidential roadmaps. Sometimes we've asked them to draw up roadmaps for errors where they didn't have one, and just try to match it against these pathways of engineering and scientific challenges. Many of our clients are investors, so when they ask us, should I invest into Psi and quantum or something, we don't say yes or no. We ask them, well, which poison would you like to pick? Do you rather have a scientific challenge today and operate on the assumption that if that is solved, you only deal with easy engineering challenges? Or do you want hard engineering challenges now and the risk of maybe a big unknown scientific challenge later on? This has very different, and I skipped the market slides with addressable market and use cases, but this has very different implications for all of these questions, right? I think that covers it. I referred to this a few times. Part of this NATO report was also for a given QPU in any of these eras, what is the cost of it, right? Footprint is shockingly large. We all see these data centers going up in the world, right? This is a scale that's significantly larger than that. Also from a power demand point of view, and of course a financial cost point of view, if you get into these tera or petaquark kind of errors. This is a summary of the recommendations for the companies that we made. And with that, we have 10 seconds left, and I think a couple questions.